Hello, fellow babies. Welcome back to the Pachter Factor on Sifted.net. Just a heads up, hey, Sifted.net is going to migrate from a straight flat fee subscription service to more of an a la carte service through Patreon. So beginning next weekend, you're going to have an opportunity to sign up for things that you're interested in at different prices. The price will go down if the only reason you belong is to watch the Pachter Factor. If you take advantage of all the services, you'll have an opportunity to spend a different amount of money. But I encourage you to check it out. People who have subscribed, obviously your subscription is good through the end of the term, and I believe we've been doing a month at a time, so that's fine. I don't benefit from this in any way. It just allows Shane to keep this thing on the air. He's putting a lot of time in. There's internet time, webcast time, and he's got camera equipment. He travels to come to my house to film this stuff. So check it out on Patreon next weekend, and you'll have an opportunity to figure out what tier you're interested in. And obviously, if you love this stuff, we encourage you to support the Pachter Factor on Sifted.net. Our first question from Sifted from Game Baron Inc. What did you think of this year's Gamescom? What are you expecting from the Tokyo Game Show, PlayStation Experience, and the Game Awards, or other events that are left for the rest of 2017? I have to say, I don't attend Gamescom, and I have attended the Tokyo Game Show, but I will not do that again. I have attended PlayStation Experience, and if it's convenient, I will probably attend that again because it's typically in LA or San Francisco or Las Vegas. I do go to the Game Awards because I think Jeff Keighley's an awesome dude and I want to support him in any way that I can. But the thing that those all have in common is they're really geared toward the consumer and they're not really geared toward industry people. I know you guys think I'm a big loser and know nothing about anything, but I am kind of an industry person. So I don't really ever think much about any of those shows. There are some reveals, you'll get a game here and there. You get things like Age of Empires, great. I mean, I'm sure that everybody's in heaven because that game's coming out. You get, pre-orders are open now for Xbox One X. And hey, Amazon sold all 500 units that it got in about a nanosecond. On that topic, Xbox One X, it is ranked on Amazon in the pre-orders year to date. Last I looked, number 66, I believe. The NES Classic was at number 23. It sold 2.3 million units lifetime, and that the bulk of those units were sold last year. So this year, maybe 1 million. And so if Xbox One X is ranked 40 slots below that, it's not even close to 1 million. And of course, the Amazon allocation is literally probably 5,000 or 10,000 units. So don't fall for the BS that comes out of WindowsCentral.com that tells you that this is the fastest pre-ordered, console in Xbox history. They only have a couple. Like the Xbox, the original, didn't have big pre-orders. The Xbox 360 maybe, but honestly, who was pre-ordering consoles back in 2005? So of course this is the most pre-ordered because they're much more organized, and they're marketing to an installed base of probably 30 million or 35 million Xbox Live Gold members. So of course they're heavily pre-ordered. I would not read much into that. So I don't think much of these shows. I don't think you get announcements that are all that leveraging. I mean, who didn't know that Xbox One X was going to go on sale? Of course it was going to go on sale. I think you occasionally hear a title. I mean, yeah, I guess. You get stuff like, the Call of Duty PS4 beta. I mean, you get things, but you knew it was going in beta. So what are we going to hear? I don't think there's really anything revealed there. What do I expect from the Game Awards? I think, each year that's gotten better. Each year, Keighley has gotten better and better presenters. The show, I think, is probably going to ultimately become the show, the Academy Awards of video games. I think it's a shame that they have the show in December. I think it would be much more powerful if they had it in January or February so that all the games of 2017 could actually be out more than a week. And you could actually kind of evaluate all of them, play all of them. But he's trying to time it where you can get a venue, it's convenient. And so what do I expect? Not much. I mean, I think the rest of 2017, there's probably only one thing I'm truly excited about, and that's PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds showing up on Xbox. I will get killed a lot, but I like that game. It's fun. I actually think the co-op, the multiplayer team base is fun. And I'm not organized enough on the PC or good enough on the PC to play. I will try it with a console controller. I think I'll probably be a little better. And I have some friends who are very, very skilled at first-person shooters. So one will hope that I can surround myself by players better than I and maybe win a chicken dinner. So I'm looking forward to that one. Moving on, we have a question from Sifted from Kidaz. Mass Effect Andromeda didn't do great with critics at launch, but it still met expected sales goals. EA just announced it's pulling DLC support for the game, but are the lower review scores enough justification for this, or do you think there's a different underlying factor that led to the decision? I think that a DLC plan, they have to forecast sales, and typically DLC, if there's 3 or 4 downloads, you typically sell about 1 unit of DLC for every unit of the game that you sold. And I would bet Mass Effect Andromeda only sold through about 5 million units. So, 3 DLCs, if they're going to sell 5 million units of that, they're going to get to keep, call it, $14 for each unit that they sell. $70 million, I think they probably evaluated it, thought, it's really not worth putting the effort in and keeping the studio distracted and working on more and more and more DLC. It's highly likely that they saw the player base erode pretty quickly in that game. And it really wasn't great. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't great. So, yeah, I don't think it's as big a surprise as perhaps your question suggests. And I don't think there's a different underlying reason. It all comes down to money. It is a profit deal. That's why EA is in business. They are owned by shareholders who are looking for returns and looking for EA shares to continue to go up. And so EA's quite capable management is going to make decisions that are based upon enhancing the value of Electronic Arts as an entity. And this is one where I think they probably figured we're not going to make more than 10 or 20 million. And if we fail at that and lose 10 million, it's a bad idea. So they tend to not want to hit bunt singles. They tend to want to hit doubles and triples and an occasional home run. And I think they just felt the resources were better spent to be allocated to another game. Our third question this week comes from Sifted from
Good luck.
SJD Swanlund. Do you believe, how would I know, that Nintendo has infringed on GameVice's patent regarding the WikiPad? If GameVice were to win the suit and be awarded a sales injunction on the Switch, what would that mean? Well, I don't know if they infringed, so I can't answer that. Putting controllers on the side of the tablet, we could argue Nintendo came up with that idea. Because when Nintendo came up with the DS, or actually even the original Game Boy, it had the controllers on the side of the screen. So making them detachable, to put on a tablet and turning into that, not that novel, but possibly they infringed, I don't know. So the answer is, if in fact the Switch is guilty, or Nintendo is guilty of a patent infringement, the remedy typically is damages, not injunction. I will give you a legal lecture because I am a lawyer. The remedy at law is always preferable to the remedy in equity. And what that means is a legal solution means the parties settle it out and the damaged party is paid for his damages. An equitable solution means the party who's damaged cannot recover enough to make it worth his while in cash and damages, and instead has to get an injunction, which is equitable relief, to keep the infringing party from infringing. It's highly unlikely that GameVice is doing this so that Switch sales go to zero and GameVice suddenly, sees massive sales. They won't see massive sales because they're not Nintendo and they don't have the software support. So more likely than not, all they're looking for is a royalty. They want a few bucks per device in fees and royalty for the alleged infringement. I don't know if they're going to win or not. If they win, Nintendo will pay them dollars per unit. If they lose, Nintendo will keep making the Switch, and either way they make the Switch. So it doesn't matter. One of my friends, Duncan Ironmonger at Scuff, filed patents on the undercarriage of an Xbox controller, PlayStation as well, where there were paddles underneath the controller and they're programmable. I don't know if any of you have a Scuff controller. I'm sure somebody watching does. But the paddles are cool, and if you're a competitive gamer and you're trying to be faster, it's faster to be able to use both thumbs and your fingers and manipulate your controller much quicker. And he filed patents, and I don't even know how many he has, but a lot. I mean, dozens and dozens of patents. Well, Microsoft decided to make a customizable controller that had paddles, and I am not privy to the conversations that went on between Microsoft and Scuff, but I am, of the understanding that Microsoft pays Scuff a royalty, which is how it works. So my guess is Microsoft's legal team was astute, found the patent, contacted Scuff, and negotiated ahead of time. But the point is, if you have a patent, you have the patent either to insulate yourself from anybody copying you or to collect damages if they do. Microsoft reached out to Duncan, paid Scuff a royalty. Scuff's happy, Microsoft's happy, consumers are happy. So that's really how it works. I would not worry about an injunction against the Switch, and I don't think that's a very likely outcome. It would be a likely outcome if it were Nintendo trying to keep Game Vice from using their patent, because they wouldn't want competition and they wouldn't want royalty. Our last question this week comes from Sifted from Surf Spider. The Xbox One X is being sold for a profit. Are the days of new consoles being sold at a loss over? If so, is it fair to assume that it leads to weaker consoles with shorter lifespans, as evidenced by the PS4 and Xbox One mid-cycle upgrades? All right, we don't know what the Xbox One X costs, and one day after it comes out, iSupply will break it down and will price all the components and tell you. So I don't know the answer. I appreciate that you do. You know, again, I'm not an electrical engineer either. I don't know what any components cost. I don't know what's in that thing. My guess is it probably costs about exactly what they're selling it for. My guess is it's in that $425 to $475 cost range. They're selling it for $500. They're probably going to give retailers something like $50 for markup, 10%. And so if it costs $450 and they sell it for $450 wholesale, they're not making money. If it costs $425, they're making a little bit. If it costs $475, they're losing a little bit. They picked the $500 price point because the price point was going to end in $99.99. They weren't going to price it at $479 or $519. But I just think that's the nearest $100 to what it costs. And I would make a bet it costs more than $400 to make, because if it was less than $400, they would have priced it at $400. So I'm not sure you're right. Consoles sold at a loss, interesting concept. I don't believe there's ever been a Nintendo console sold at a loss. So, Nintendo steadfastly refuses to sell their consoles at a loss, which results in about half of their consoles being utter disasters, and the other half fine. So, the GameCube was a disaster. The Wii was fine, was great. The Wii U was a disaster. The Switch is great. That's where I'm getting half. I mean, I guess we can roll back to NES and SNES and all that, but they don't sell at a loss. Sony didn't sell at a loss of PS1 or PS2. My understanding is they lost money on PS3 at $599. Well, the launch price, they lost money, and my understanding is they lost money when they cut the price to $399. Yeah, it took them a long time to recover the cost of that. And I don't actually remember, we can look this up, but I think that they had to create a fabrication plant to make their own cell processors. And the reason it cost so much was, my understanding, the failure rate on the microprocessor was huge when it started. It was like 20% of them didn't work. And it was because they had the 7 cores. I think it was 7 or 8. But I think it had 7 cores. And the way it was built, I think there were 8 and you used 7. And they built an 8th one for redundancy. And it was turning out like 20% of the units had 2 of the 7 cores that didn't work. It was something like 2 of the 8. So they didn't work. And the failure rate is the real reason it cost so much. And they weren't letting them out unless they tested it because they didn't want a red ring of death. Anyway, so Sony, that was at a loss. I am super confident that the PS4 is profitable, that they are making money on the PS4 and have been from day one. They were ready to launch the PS4 at a lower price, but Microsoft did them a favor by pricing the Xbox One at $500. Remember that with Kinect? So Sony got a break and they could come out at $399. If Microsoft had said $399 instead of $499 back in 2013, Sony was ready to price at a loss, but they didn't. So the answer to your question is console makers are going to do whatever it takes to capture share. They value you as a customer for your lifetime value, not for your initial purchase. They know nobody buys a console and uses it as a paperweight. You buy a console, and then if you're a good customer, you buy software, and they get a royalty on that. You join PlayStation Network or Xbox Live, and they make recurring revenue on that. And maybe you watch an occasional movie, or you do microtransactions in the game, or you buy indie games, or you do something. You buy DLC. So the tail is where they really make the money. The point about mid-cycle upgrades, I think that the console makers are trying to keep you as a customer. Remember, there's much more money made from microtransactions and DLC and full game downloads and Xbox Live subscriptions and PlayStation Network subscriptions than on the console. At best, they're making $25 or $50 on the console. They make, between $12 and $18 on every game you buy, and they make $5 a month on Xbox Live for your lifetime. So they make much, much more money on those things than they do from a console. But these mid-cycle upgrades, I think they're fully intended to keep a PlayStation customer loyal for life and always give him something new and shiny, the shiny new object that you just have to have. They're going to give you that, whether it be PS4 Pro, PlayStation VR, Xbox One S, Xbox One X. And, I got to say, who knows, but I would bet of the first million Xbox One X's sold, I'd bet 800,000 of those buyers own an Xbox One right now. I mean, I can't see why you would buy your very first Xbox and you'd pay $500 for it when you can pretty much get an Xbox One S for $250. Why would you pay twice as much? I know, because you have a 4K TV. And you have a 4K TV because you're a moron, because there's no 4K broadcast. But sure, if you're super rich, if you are, related to Donald Trump, then you have that. But most people don't. You shouldn't have a 4K TV yet unless you just happen to have gotten one to future-proof. And you're going to get an Xbox One X because you already have an Xbox One. You can trade it in at GameStop for $100 or $150. And that means that the net cost of buying the new console is $350 or $400, and you really want it because it's a bright, shiny object. So the mid-cycle upgrades are just to keep you loyal. That's really what they're all about. You don't really see in the aggregate more consoles sold because of them. They just keep the fan base more and more loyal. So I think that's why we get them. And with that, fellow babies, we're going to call this Pactor Factor to an end. Really, really want to thank all of you who subscribed to Sifted in the most recent couple of months due to our pleas. And I want to thank you for your past support and hope that we get your future support on Patreon starting this next weekend. So again, fellow babies, thanks for joining us. If you don't subscribe and you don't go to Patreon, it's cool. Watch on YouTube for free, but you got to follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter, and give me a shout out when you follow and say hi. Say, saw you on YouTube and thanks for the Pactor Factor. Appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you next week. I'll give you a pro tip, by the way, for those of you who shave, and I'm sure like 90% of you don't. half are women and the other half are 11 years old. If you shave, I'll give you a tip. Use an electric razor first and then shave in the shower. So if you use an electric razor, you get all the stubble down to pretty fine, then just use soap and shave in the shower. I swear to God, I change my razor blade about once a year, for real. A blade lasts me a year because it barely touches anything, and you get a really clean shave. So that's my pro tip.